Hello friends, I recently reviewed the Trijicon RMR. As seen here, it's time to review an even older, a far older classic optic, the Trijicon ACOG specifically, the one, the only, the 4-power TA31 ACOG. The ACOG you think of when you think of ACOGs. The TA31, like all ACOGs, is a fixed power optic, no magnification adjustment here, and perhaps none needed, depending on what you plan to do with the scope. ACOG stands for Advanced Combat Optical Gun Sight. Though there are battery-powered options, the classic ACOG illumination configuration is this one, fiber optic and tritium, no power source necessary. You know, besides the burning gas ball in the sky and the power of radioactive isotope decay. The original TA01 hit the market all the way back in 1987, and in 1995, SOCOM bought a lot of them, and it's been in service with various branches ever since, in one form or another. In the RMR review, I made the argument that despite my love of the little optic, it feels a bit dated in 2023, so surely the ACOG is a bit dated at this point, right? Well, you know, me and the goddamn ACOG are the same age, you know, so it should feel pretty dated at this point. But somehow, no, it doesn't. The ACOG still feels fresh and useful, unlike me. The ACOG is a lot like Tom Cruise. Despite being ancient, both Tom Cruise and the ACOG still feel relevant and useful, propped up by excellent engineering and hidden religious space magic. Again, like Tom Cruise, the ACOG has some strange quirks, though, that you must work around. Tom Cruise is bizarrely enthusiastic, to the point of giving me the creeps. He says your first name a lot, and then the ACOG has a very small eye box. Tom Cruise flies planes with his Dianetic space magic, and the ACOG might be too bright for some people, and it sometimes gets in the way of other accessories. Again, you know, close enough. Do these issues matter? All optics have trade-offs, so we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the pros and cons here and comparing it to the lpvos and just to regular red dots. Now, for my own bias, I love the ACOG. I prefer it to most other zoomy options on the market. I would almost always rather have the ACOG. So know that going into it. I think the ACOG is fantastic, and for many applications, it might be worth a look. The ACOG is lightweight, most models require no battery changes, and the image quality is insane. Don't take my word for it, try one. The field of view is huge, and the glass is excellent with that sort of larger-than-life, realer-than-real effect that truly amazing glass gives you. And perhaps most importantly, ACOGs are extremely durable, bordering on indestructible. Do they still sometimes have problems? Yes, of course, they are manufactured items, but they are quite difficult to kill and will live virtually forever, like Tom Cruise. So let's dive in. Features. The Trijicon TA31 ACOG is a prismatic telescopic optic with a fixed 4-power magnification. Mine is using the included TA51 mount, which unexpectedly I liked and kept on the gun. I thought for sure I'd get tired of it after a few weeks and replace it. A few years in, I still kind of like it. The TA31 ACOG is dual illuminated using both this big fiber optic pipe here and the internal tritium. I mean, of course it's internal. That was a dumb thing for me to say. This script is pretty dumb now that I'm thinking about it. This passive illumination means that there is no circuitry in the ACOG and no battery is required to illuminate the reticle. The downside is that the tritium, which glows because it's radioactive as fuck, will degrade and fade after a decade and some change, you know, up to a decade and a half. And it depends on at what point you look at it and consider it too dim. You know what I mean? It's all relative. But the fiber optic will still continue to work, and that's what you're using for illumination most of the time anyway, and the tritium can be replaced, though it's not exactly cheap, to be fair. Beneath these tethered caps are our windage and elevation points. I love these caps tied to the optic so that you can't lose them. A great feature. Our adjustments are 1/2 MOA per click, and the clicks feel and sound very nice. What more do you want there? Oh, and then there are gaskets on these caps, so they're waterproof. Speaking of, there is conflicting information on the waterproof depth for these things, but whichever number is right almost doesn't matter because all of the numbers are insane. I've found everything from 300 feet to 500 feet as the rated depth. I mean, fucking hell, it's very waterproof, apparently. Mine just gets, I don't know, drizzled on sometimes, if I'm feeling frisky. I mean, if I just, don't want to leave the range because of inclement weather. You know, I could have said a lot of things better in this video, but you know, I have to live with my choices. This particular ACOG has the classic red chevron reticle. At a glance, you can tell what color an ACOG reticle is going to be based on the color of the fiber optic pipe on top. The reticle is quite simple, like my brain waves, with none of that extra fancy pants stuff that might as well be hieroglyphics. I can't read either, but at least hieroglyphics have domesticated cheetahs and birdmen that look like they'd be pretty fun to party with. You ever notice that Horus has some crazy fucking drip? Look at that. Even in full bird form, Horus would show you up. You know, those bird women just flock to him. He's getting so much bird pussy. You know he's writing like 5 clay child support tablets every month. So the chevron works best for me. I'm in my mid-30s, so this is the video game reticle I grew up with. Very few of the ACOG reticles are complicated, per se. Nothing like the utterly batshit, insane, mind-twisting, 4-dimensional geometric nightmare that is this lpvo reticle. But some of the ACOG reticles do have more junk on them, so pick the one that works for you. The open donut is another one that interests me, and maybe you have more measurable brain activity than I do and can operate one like this. Me personally, I can't. The ACOG has famously clear glass with a wide field of view. 36.8 feet at 100 yards, to be exact. That's fucking huge. Quite a bit more than most LPVOs. The LCAN Spectre comes in close at 34.2 feet. That's another optic with fantastic glass. For me, the simple ACOG reticle coupled with the crazy image quality makes it easy to guesstimate where your shot is headed without extra info, but as I'm fond of saying, more on that later. As with its image quality, the ACOG is famed for its durability. There are stories of ACOGs surviving some wild shit. Mine won't be subjected to anything like that, but it has performed perfectly so far. However, I must note, as I did in the RMR video, that there has been anecdotal evidence of Trijicon's quality control slipping a bit during the pandemic, though I didn't hear about it to remotely the same degree as the issues with the RMR. I know of people who purchased ACOG lemons during the pandemic. I have 2 ACOGs at the moment, and they've both been very solid. None of this is definitive, but that nearly useless anecdotal info is there for you. Do with it what you will. So I haven't mentioned weight yet. To me, that's the craziest part. With this bulky ass mount, the whole thing weighs 15.1 ounces. For the level of durability and the overall quality, that is very light. And that lightness is another reason I've just kept the standard mount on there. Alongside this RMR on the Arasaka mount, this whole optics arrangement weighs just shy of 19 ounces. I think it's like 18.6 ounces to be exact. And because I personally can't work the zoomy thing on the LPVOs very fast, I still need to pair a micro optic with the Vortex just in case, as many other folks do as well. And of course, not all LPVOs are even close to that heavy, but they are, as a general rule, among the heavier optics options. They also happen to be among the most versatile as well, so there's always a trade-off. By the way, it probably seems like I'm on some kind of crusade against LPVOs. I'm not. I don't dislike them at all. In fact, you're going to see a Trijicon ACOG on one of my guns pretty soon. Instead, I'm trying to point you towards some other options since the LPVOs kind of dominate the conversation right now, and rightfully so in many cases. But you might benefit from something like this or the LCAN or a red dot with a magnifier. I'm just here to point out these other options to you. There are plenty of other people talking about the LPVOs. But before we move on to performance, let's briefly discuss the problems with the ACOG. Small ones first before the big ones, and then we'll talk about how those impact performance, if at all. So you can't adjust the magnification of the ACOG. If you're getting one of the 1.5 power ones, let's say, that's fine, who cares? But with the 4 power one, or really anything higher than 2 power, you're likely going to need or want a micro red dot or something similar to help you make faster close range shots, or offset irons, just something. There are people who are incredibly good at shooting at close range with just the 4 power ACOG, but not all of us are going to be able to master that technique, and it's probably going to be faster to have a secondary optic on the gun. This also lets you have a secondary 0 option, and that has a host of other benefits. Some people don't like the brightness of the ACOG and how the illumination of the fiber tritium models work in general. This isn't a problem with the powered ones, obviously. The fiber optic is very, very bright in the sun. Personally, I love this. It makes me so happy, but it may not work well for you at all. The tried and true method is to just put some fucking tape over the fiber optic pipe and peel it back until you reach the desired brightness. It's low tech, but it works. However, when you're in a shadowed or dark area looking into a bright area, like inside a building looking out into bright sunlit nature, you may find that the reticle is not nearly bright enough for you. Yeah, in this situation, the illumination will be dim. That's how passive optics work. The trade-off is there's no battery to look after. The good news is that if you're looking out into a bright area, you can still see the etched reticle just fine, even if it isn't glowing brightly. And because the fiber optic pipe catches so much light, there's usually a little bit of glow. Even then, that's one of the reasons why they make the damn thing so bright. But last of all, and this is the big one, the eye box is small. This is probably the complaint you've heard more than any other about this optic. Hell, it might be the reason you don't already own one of these. But as I'm fond of saying, we'll talk more about it later. But depending on how you set up your gun and your physical size and how you shoot the 4-power ACOG, it may not work for you at all. The eye relief is 1.5 inches, and it's not super forgiving. I personally get all up in the gun shit, so that's no problem for me. I love it, but you very well may not. And now on to performance, where we'll finally talk about all the things I keep saying that we'll talk about later. Performance. I love the 4-power ACOG. There, that's how it performs. I kid, but the performance is excellent. There's a ton to praise. But to be entirely fair, a few things to complain about that based on your preferences will either be no big deal or a total deal breaker. Let's talk about the bad first. We've already mentioned the problems, so now let's discuss how they affect performance. Eye relief is the big one, so let's get that out of the way. For me, putting the optic as far back as it can be on the rail when I shoulder the rifle, I'm right there. It's perfect for me. The optic is lined up exactly the way I want it to be, but we're all different sizes, and 1.5 inches doesn't leave much wiggle room, as those spam emails have been telling you. For some people, 1.5 inches just doesn't get the job done. If you're abnormally tall or abnormally short, you might have trouble. You might have to cram yourself up on the gun to see the chevron, or alternatively have to collapse the stock further in than is comfortable for you. This might also limit what you can put on the gun. I don't use backup iron sights myself on a rifle ever, but I'm not saying that you should go that route. For what I prefer and for what I would need a gun to do, modern optics are plenty reliable. But the ACOG might leave no room for something like offset irons behind it, so they would have to go up front. Keep that in mind. Luckily, there are mounts that can help you with this that move the optic farther to the rear where it might be more comfortable for you. But also consider this. No amount of movement will make the eye box smaller or larger. The mount is just moving the eye box around to another location that you might find preferable. We're just moving the problem, not solving it. I've been shooting AR-15s for 20 years. I have the muscle memory down that allows me to snap in place behind the optic the same way every time. But I for damn sure didn't have that for the first few years. If you're new to rifles or don't go to the range very often, you might find the narrow eye box tremendously frustrating. The ACOG is a super fast prism optic, but if you're having to wiggle your head around dealing with that tiny eye box, you're gonna fucking hate it. So all this to say, you really need to use one of these before you actually spend the money. Figure out a way to try one. Next, the brightness. As I mentioned before, some folks feel that without some tape over the fiber pipe, the optic is way too bright. And without a doubt, if you're in a dark area looking into a bright one, the reticle isn't going to be very bright in that circumstance, or even bright at all, depending on the ambient light. Because you need that ambient light to illuminate the reticle, and the tritium isn't powerful enough to be visible during the day. But does this affect performance? In my opinion and experience, no. But if it bothers you, that's all that really matters, and it might bother you. Again, I'd recommend checking one of these out before you make a purchase. For me, this doesn't impact performance because, unlike some passively lit optics, this one has an etched reticle. Even with no illumination, you still have a nice big fat chevron that you can plainly see. The only thing that might cause a problem under that circumstance is the contrast, so do be aware of that. As for the high brightness in sunlight, I love it. It's amazing. You won't be able to miss the chevron in daylight. I personally don't use any tape, but be aware that you might need to. So, problems out of the way, how does it perform overall? What's it like to shoot it? Well, it's glorious. If you have the muscle memory down to get behind the optic quickly and accurately, there are few magnified optics as fast as the ACOG. The size and clarity of the image coupled with a fantastically simple reticle makes it crazy simple to use. The field of view is massive, so even if you don't perfectly line up the gun before you get behind the ACOG, you're going to be able to very quickly shift to hit whatever in a hurry. And the beautiful simplicity of the reticle is excellent. So, I'm dumb. You probably get that impression listening to this. I don't know what these notches below the chevron mean, and I don't really care, but I do know that after shooting this optic for a couple of years, it's very easy for me to estimate the holdover at range. It doesn't get much easier. I love it. I kind of use it the way I use the EOTech reticle, where I just kind of roughly know where to hold based on the distance. And that glass quality, god damn, it's good. If you haven't looked through one, just do it so that you know. You gotta know. You won't know until you know. Now, I'm not saying that other optics don't have outstanding glass. Many of them do. But the ACOG's glass is among the best on the market. For $1,000, it's hard to find better glass. It's even hard at $2,000 and up. The image has that sort of realer than real quality to it, like it's better than real life. I love it. All these qualities also make the ACOG excellent for just looking at stuff. You get a very nice, wide, clear view of the target, and you can be very certain of what you're shooting at, which is, in my opinion, very important. Folks rarely discuss it, but that's one of the best benefits of a zoomy optic. You can look at stuff, gather more information about the world around you, and generally have a much better idea of what the fuck is going on before you shoot some stuff. Because the ACOG weighs so little and is so far back on the gun, this rifle feels crazy nimble. That's one of those things that is hard to describe, but heavy rifles weighed down with heavy optics feel sluggish to me. They're more tiring to use, slower, and generally less pleasant. Now's the moment where that one white guy over 40 pops up and says, "Now why don't you just lift some weights, bro?" Indeed, strength makes any physical task easier. But imagine how much easier it would be if you were both strong and had a lightweight rifle with a lightweight optics setup. That would be optimal performance. Because the ACOG is a fixed magnification prism, there is no one power option. And though it may not be necessary for you, for me it is, and so I have to have a second optic. My preference is a canted micro red dot, in this case an RMR on an Arisaka mount. Whatever your red dot of choice is, it's going to work fine. Switching between these two is fast. So damn fast. Just turn the rifle a little bit and you have one optic or the other. Though this might feel strange to you at first, you'll likely get used to it. Although as with most things, it's not going to work for everybody. You may prefer an RMR mounted on top of the ACOG. That's a totally legit solution. Or you may find that an lpvo is the better solution. ACOG or lpvo. So why do I prefer the ACOG and RMR combo to a more modern lpvo? Well, first of all, I'm not saying that my preference is superior. LPVOs have many outstanding qualities. You're dealing with one optic that covers every scenario. They can be cost effective, although that depends heavily on which one you choose. And you get all kinds of intermediate magnification levels that you're not going to get with this setup here. But the ACOG and RMR combo is lighter than most of the LPVOs on the market. In many cases, far lighter. This setup, including all mounts, weighs 18.6 ounces. That's crazy. The Trijicon ACOG LPVOs are among the lightest, and even they are just on par with this combo. That lightness is lovely. If you've only ever used a heavy rifle, you should check out a lightweight one and just see how it feels to you. Because variable optics have to cover so much ground, they don't perform any of the tasks extremely well. By this, I mean that the magnified image will almost always have a smaller field of view than the ACOG, and then the one power image looks kind of strange, like you're staring through this metal tube into another dimension that is slightly different from our own. It looks very weird in a way that a standard red dot or holographic sight just doesn't. Additionally, you have to spend a shitload of money on an LPVO to get glass as good as this ACOG, which sells for about $1,000 as of the time of making this video, depending on where you look. You can spend twice as much on an LPVO and still find the glass wanting compared to the ACOG. But you get two optics in one with the LPVO, you say. That is a totally valid argument. But many people ultimately end up adding a secondary red dot anyway. And that's because even with one of those lever thingies that lowers or raises the magnification, it takes a bit longer than you'd think to change the magnification on an LPVO. It's so much quicker to just cant the gun and use a red dot that you have waiting. But you may find that none of this is useful to you. Hey, this is just one idiot's logic. Final thoughts. Despite its age, I still think the ACOG is a fantastic option. Me and the ACOG are of a time, I guess. Maybe I just feel a kinship with the damn thing. But unlike me, the ACOG is still very useful. To say that it has a proven track record would be a tremendous understatement. This is one of the optics that we know the most about because of how long it's been used. More than that, it just performs. I don't make these reviews in a vacuum. Compared to everything else I tried alongside it over the last couple of years, I noticed that I consistently perform best with the ACOG. I look forward to using it. I feel comfortable when I'm taking a shot at a longer distance. Durability, amazing glass, ease of use, there's a lot to love here. But with all things, there must be a trade-off. For some people, the ACOG just doesn't work well, and so I can't blanket recommend that you go buy one, but I can without hesitation recommend that you try one. If nothing else, do it for the video game nostalgia. Thanks for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and I'll talk to you soon. Night-night.